When you think about building discipline, what's the first image that comes to mind? For most of us, it's a version of a battle. It's you gritting your teeth, forcing yourself out of a warm bed at 5 a.m. It's you heroically denying yourself the dessert, the scroll, the comfortable escape. The narrative is one of conquest, your noble willpower, the general marshaling forces against a lazy, resistant, undisciplined self. This is the conventional model of discipline. And it's the model that fails almost everyone, not because you're weak, but because the model itself is fundamentally flawed. It frames self-improvement as a state of perpetual civil war. Every act of discipline becomes a skirmish where you must defeat a part of yourself. You win the battle to go to the gym, but you're exhausted from the fight before you even lift a weight. You win the battle to open your work document, but the mental cost of that victory leaves nothing for the actual work. This approach is exhausting because it's unsustainable by design. It relies on a finite resource, conscious, effortful willpower. And the central, frustrating tension is this: the harder you try within this model, the more heroic the effort you summon, the faster you tend to burn out. Think about it. You decide to get serious. You commit to 2 hours of deep work daily, a strict diet, a new morning routine, and daily meditation. For a few days, maybe a week, you are a titan of will. You are winning every battle. But the cognitive and emotional tax of maintaining that siege is enormous. Your brain, wired for efficiency, begins to rebel. The resistance isn't a moral failing. It's a system overload, so you crash. And in the narrative of the willpower model, that crash isn't seen as a design flaw of the system you're using. It's seen as a personal failure. You weren't strong enough. You didn't want it badly enough. This sets up a brutal cycle. Guilt leads to another round of even more forceful effort, which leads to a more profound burnout. The promise of this model is self-mastery, but the actual product is often self-conflict and fatigue. You end up feeling like you're constantly negotiating with, or fighting against, your own mind. That's not discipline. That's internal trench warfare. So if trying harder with sheer force of will is a trap, a system that guarantees depletion, then what's the alternative? The answer isn't to try harder. It's to build differently. It requires shifting from a model of conquest to a model of cultivation. From fighting your nature to working with its wiring. But to understand that alternative, we first need to look under the hood. We need to see exactly why this willpower as war model is neurologically and psychologically destined to break down. What are the specific mechanisms of the crash? Because once you see the anatomy of the broken system, the path to a better one becomes not just appealing, but obvious. So, let's dissect the crash. The first mechanism is something called ego depletion. Think of your willpower not as a muscle, but as a shared pool of mental energy for all acts of self-control. Every decision you resist, the donut, the snooze button, the distracting website draws from that same pool. Research shows that after exerting self-control on one task, you perform worse on a subsequent, unrelated task requiring discipline. Your brain isn't being lazy. It's conserving a finite resource. Framing discipline as a series of heroic denials is like trying to run a marathon by sprinting every 100 meters. You exhaust the very system you're relying on. The second mechanism is about identity threat. When you tell yourself, I must resist my lazy nature, you create an internal civil war. One part of you is the stern general. The other is the rebellious soldier. Neuroscience shows that this conflict activates the brain's threat detection systems, the same regions that light up during social rejection or physical danger. Your brain interprets your own discipline as an attack, triggering resistance and stress hormones. That's why forcing yourself feels so awful. It's not a character flaw. It's a neurological alarm bell going off because your strategy is, literally, threatening to you. Now, let's look at the goal itself. The big, impressive, I will write a novel goal. It seems motivating, but it often has the opposite effect. A large goal creates what psychologists call cognitive load. It's overwhelming. Your brain doesn't know where to start, so it often chooses not to. The anxiety of the huge task triggers avoidance, a form of self-protection. This is compounded by the all-or-nothing mindset this model encourages. If your discipline is defined by perfect adherence to a massive goal, then missing one day isn't a stumble, it's proof you failed. The identity becomes, I'm not a disciplined person, and the whole system collapses. So we have a triple failure, a draining energy pool, an internal identity war, and goals that trigger anxiety and binary failure. This isn't a personal failing. It's a design flaw in the system you were taught to use. The willpower model fails because it fights human wiring. It asks you to override fundamental mechanisms of energy conservation, self-preservation, and threat avoidance. You can win battles this way, but you will lose the war every time. But if that's the anatomy of the broken system, what does a system built for human wiring look like? It looks like this: 1 push-up, 1 sentence, 1 minute of focused work, 1 sip of water instead of the whole glass. This is the core of Kaizen, the philosophy of continuous, tiny improvement. It's not about heroic leaps. It's about a strategic retreat from the battlefield of willpower into a system that works with your wiring, not against it. The mechanism is disarmingly simple, which is why we dismiss it. We think big results require big actions. But the psychology reveals the opposite. A massive goal triggers the brain's threat detection system, the same system we just dissected. It sees the mountain, calculates the energy cost, and floods you with resistance and anxiety. A tiny action, however, is neurologically invisible to that defense system. It's not a threat. It's a rounding error. It bypasses the resistance entirely. This is the first mechanical advantage, the bypass. You're not fighting the resistance. You're going under its radar. You complete the action before the part of you that's scared of failure even has time to mobilize. The second mechanism is reward rewiring. The brain's habit loop craves completion. When you set out to do 50 push-ups and stop at 10, your brain registers that as a failure. No reward. But when you set out to do 1 push-up and you do it, you get a complete success signal. A tiny hit of dopamine for a task completed. You are literally training your brain to associate the initiation of the activity with a reward, not with dread. Over time, this rewires the motivational pathway. The action itself starts to feel like the win, which leads to the third and most profound mechanism, identity construction. We think, I'll do 50 push-ups, and then I'll be a person who exercises. Kaizen inverts it. You do 1 push-up, and in that moment you are, by definition, a person who just exercised. The action isn't a step toward an identity. It is a direct, immediate expression of it. You build the identity 1 microscopic, undeniable brick at a time. The person who writes 1 sentence is a writer today. The person who reads 1 page is a reader. You prove it to yourself through action, not aspiration. This is why starting small isn't a compromise. It's a strategic exploit. The big leap model is a high-stakes gamble on a volatile resource, your willpower and mood. Kaizen is a low-risk investment in a renewable resource, your identity and your brain's own reward circuitry. The big leap asks you to be a different person first in order to act. Kaizen lets you act as the person you want to be, right now, in the smallest possible way. And that repeated action is what builds the person. So the system isn't about willpower at all. It's about designing actions so small that they require none. The discipline then shifts from the brutal effort of the action itself to the gentle, consistent discipline of returning to the system, which raises the obvious, practical question. If the mechanism is this tiny action, how do you actually build a life around it? How do you design a protocol that turns this principle into automatic, daily progress? You design it by starting with the 1-minute action, but you build the protocol around it. The action is the seed. The protocol is the soil, water, and sunlight that lets it grow without your constant attention. Your first step is to choose your target area. Not a goal, an area. The difference is critical. A goal is write a book. An area is my writing practice. The goal is a distant finish line that can feel paralyzing. The area is a space you can tend to daily with a tiny action. Pick one area of your work or life where you feel the most friction between your intentions and your actions. Now, break that area down to its atomic 1-minute starting point. If your area is physical health, the action is not work out for 30 minutes. It's put on my workout shoes, or do 1 push-up. If it's writing, it's open the document and write 1 sentence. The rule is simple. The action must be so small that the thought of doing it elicits no internal resistance. If you feel a hint of, ugh, it's still too big, shrink it further. This is the most common design flaw, choosing an action that's still a miniature version of the old willpower-driven task. Read for 10 minutes can still feel like a chore. Read one paragraph often does not. The tiny action isn't what you hope to eventually do. It's the guaranteed on-ramp that makes the eventual action possible. Next, you engineer the cue. This is the trigger that tells your brain, now is the time for that tiny action. The most reliable cues are anchored to existing routines. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write one sentence. After I brush my teeth at night, I will do one squat. The cue must be specific and unavoidable, piggybacking on a habit you already have. Then you design the immediate reward. This isn't about the long-term payoff of being fit or published. It's about the micro-reward that follows the micro-action, training your brain to crave the sequence. The reward can be as simple as a checkmark on your notepad, a mental done, or literally savoring the first sip of that coffee right after the action. The feeling of completion is the primary reward. This is your three-part protocol cue. Tiny action, immediate reward. You document it. One line in your notebook. After, the protocol's power is that it operates below the level of negotiation. You don't debate whether you have the energy for one sentence. You just execute the sequence you pre-designed. The discipline shifts from mustering effort for the task to maintaining fidelity to your own system. You are no longer fighting yourself to write. You are simply being the person who, after coffee, writes one sentence. And that is how you build a life around a tiny action. Not by heroic expansions, but by ruthless protection of that simple, automatic sequence. You guard it. For weeks, you do not increase the action. You only increase your consistency. The momentum builds in the background, quietly, but this raises the final, subtle point. If the protocol runs on autopilot, where does discipline actually live? If it's not in the effort of the action, and the system is designed to be easy, what are you actually mastering? It lives in the system. Discipline is no longer the fuel for the action. It becomes the skill of maintaining the protocol. Your mastery shifts from performing the push-up to protecting the 5-minute window where it happens. From writing the page to defending the quiet morning when your laptop opens. This is the long-term management of Kaizen. You measure progress not in daily leaps, but in cycles and plateaus. A cycle is a month of flawless protocol execution, where the action and its protective routines happen automatically. A plateau is when that automaticity is solid, and you feel the gentle internal nudge that a tiny incremental adjustment is possible. Not from ambition, but from the system's own built-up momentum. The adjustment is always microscopic. You do not go from 1 push-up to 20. You go from 1 to 2, from 5 minutes of writing to 6. The rule is, the new level must feel as trivial as the old one did when you started. If it introduces mental friction, you've jumped too far. You retreat, protect the current protocol, and wait. This is where the critical shift happens. You stop seeking motivation, the emotional fuel for heroic effort, and start trusting the process. Motivation is a weather system. Volatile, unreliable. Process is gravity. It just works. Your job is not to feel like doing it. Your job is to notice when the protocol is threatened and to gently defend it. For example, you're tired. The old discipline would demand you power through your full workout, creating resentment. The new discipline asks, can I still do the 1-minute version? If the answer is no, the discipline is to ask, what is the absolute minimum that keeps the sequence intact? Maybe it's just putting on your shoes. The identity is, I am someone who protects the system, not, I am someone who conquers fatigue. This reframes every obstacle. A busy day isn't a reason to break the chain. It's the precise condition your protocol was designed for. This triviality is its armor. The goal is not to be impervious to life's chaos, but to have a system so simple that chaos flows around it. So we arrive at the final identity contrast. Someone who practices discipline is always performing. They are the hero in the story of their own struggle, relying on grand gestures and willpower. Their identity is tied to the effort. When the effort falters, the identity crumbles. Someone who is disciplined has dissolved the performance into the architecture of their day. Their discipline is the quiet maintenance of a system that runs on automatic. Their identity is the system itself. I am someone whose writing happens, whose health is maintained, whose progress is steady. The mastery is in the consistency of the conditions, not the intensity of the action. The core payoff is this: sustainable self-mastery. It is built not on the volatile fuel of willpower, but on the calm, reliable engine of tiny, automatic progress. You are not fighting yourself. You are curating a process, and that process, protected day after day, becomes who you are. It's the discipline of steady progress. Not a battle you win, but a garden you tend.